I found out that my wife was at a singles party with her friends. It was just any night, without great expectations. I had just gotten off work and, by chance, I passed by the bar where the event was taking place. I don't usually go to these places, but that day, something made me come in. Inside, the loud sound of music drowned out people's incessant chatter, lights flashed in neon tones and a strong smell of alcohol mixed with perfume filled the air. I sat at the bar, ordered a beer and started watching the crowd. It was then that, in the midst of the confusion, my eyes stopped on a familiar woman. She was laughing, surrounded by friends, clearly having fun. But it wasn't just any woman. Was she? The woman with whom I shared my life, dreams and promises. My wife. The shock came in waves. She betrayed me. And at that moment, the blood ran cold. It wasn't the party itself. It was the place, the atmosphere of freedom and the way she was with her friends, living as if nothing else mattered. She didn't see me right away. I, on the other hand, couldn't look away. Everything around me seemed to be in slow motion as my mind spun with a mixture of anger and disbelief. What was she doing there? Did I really know the woman I was married to? My heart raced, and the beer in my hands felt heavy. For a second, I thought about getting up, walking away, and pretending I never saw her there. But something inside me held me back. Suddenly, his eyes met mine. Her expression changed instantly. The smile faded, and the echoing laughter of seconds ago was replaced by silent desperation. Time stopped. She remained static, as if she had been caught in the act, without reaction, without words. Our locked gazes were enough to say everything that needed to be said. What would happen next? The truth was painful, but what was worse was knowing that I was about to discover something even darker than I could imagine. I knew something was wrong for months. Those silent phone calls that she said were from work, the nights she went out with her friends and came back late, claiming they were just talking. It all seemed too vague, too convenient. And now, here she was, caught up in a world I never thought she would be a part of. When she finally walked towards me, hesitantly, I realized there was much more to this story than simple betrayal. There was an abyss between us, a hole that she had been digging for a long time, and I had been blind for not seeing it. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out right away. I can explain, he murmured, trying to find an excuse, any excuse, that would make it seem less horrible than it really was. But nothing she said would change what I already knew. And worse, what I didn't know yet, but was about to discover. The last few months have passed like a movie in my head. Every gesture of hers, every word spoken in a hurry, every moment that I naively trusted, now made sense. That feeling that something was wrong, that emptiness in my stomach that I tried to ignore, everything was there, ready to explode. She cheated, but what else was behind all of this? I took a deep breath. The pain of betrayal was intense, as if I were being stabbed in the chest repeatedly. But the worst was yet to come. She had something else to tell me, something that, deep down, I dreaded hearing. Her silence at that moment was already a confession of something much bigger. It wasn't just about a party, it wasn't just about that night. It was about choices made in the dark, secrets kept and decisions that would change our lives forever. She looked at me with wide eyes, begging for understanding, but how can anyone forgive the unforgivable? In a second, all the promises we made to each other disintegrated, and the only thing left was the question that kept running through my head: how far does this go? What else are you hiding? Her friends, without realizing what was happening, continued laughing and toasting in the background, as if nothing could touch the lightness of that night. But we were both stuck in a world apart, where the air was heavy and every second felt like an eternity. She was desperate, and I, just on the verge of a decision. Still, I knew I couldn't just walk away. Something more was to come. Something big. And it would be in that moment, in that silent look between us, that everything would change. The consequences were inevitable, and whatever she was about to reveal, I wasn't prepared. I thought I knew the limit of pain. But that night, I was about to discover that the pain has deep layers and that betrayal, this betrayal, would be just the beginning of an endless fall. She finally gathered her courage and said the words I never thought I would hear. "Maybe we can have an open marriage." Those words cut the silence with the violence of a punch. I knew, at that moment, that there would be no going back. There, in that stuffy bar, amidst the music and the distant laughter of her friends, our marriage was crumbling before us. But there was more, much more that she hadn't said yet. And I was about to find out what that would be. All I needed to do now was listen, with my heart closed and my mind prepared for the worst. But was the worst really to come? Now the question was, what else would I discover? John sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the morning reflection that filtered through the room's thin curtains. Silence filled the room, and he could hear the light footsteps of Amanda, his wife, downstairs. They had been together for over 10 years, since their college days, when everything seemed simpler. The love between them was born without haste, with conversations that lasted late into the night and promises exchanged between passionate kisses. At that time, they swore that nothing could separate them. Life, however, was different now. Routine had taken over their lives in an almost imperceptible way, but looking back, John knew something had changed. That sparkle in Amanda's eyes seemed to have diminished, not because of a lack of love, but perhaps because of familiarity, the weight of the responsibilities they both carried. He sighed, thinking about how distant the last few months had been, marked by silences that were once filled with laughter and confidences. Amanda, on the other hand, had learned to hide her feelings well. She knew something was wrong, she felt it deep in her chest, but she wasn't sure when the feeling started. John was a good husband, always was. He worked hard, always available, always worried about her and the future they were building together. But the monotony, the repetition of days, the feeling of being stuck in an unchanging routine, all of this seemed to increasingly suffocate her. At first, Amanda thought it was just a phase. Every couple goes through ups and downs, she told herself. However, when that phase began to last for more than a year, Amanda began to question whether it was really just a phase. She began to be distracted by other things, going out with friends, new hobbies, even short work trips that she began to accept more frequently. John noticed the absences, but, distracted by his own work, he never asked questions that could expose what he already suspected. Maybe, somewhere in his mind, he didn't want to know the answers. They lived in a comfortable house with modern decor that they chose together. Every corner of the house had memories of the two of them. The large sofa in the living room, where they spent afternoons watching movies and laughing at the same comedies, now seemed emptier. The dinner table, where they discussed plans for the future, was rarely used for long conversations like before. Even the bedroom, where so many nights were dedicated to passion, now seemed just a place of rest and no longer of connection. John, despite everything, remained faithful to his obligations and his role as a devoted husband. He still believed that their love could be revitalized, that the tiredness of everyday life was just a temporary obstacle. He still looked at her with admiration, remembering the woman he had fallen in love with, and who, even after so long, he continued to love deeply. Amanda, in turn, maintained a facade of normality. She knew how hard John worked to keep things going, and part of her felt guilty for not sharing the same feelings with the same intensity anymore. But the truth was that, for her, routine had suffocated that romance that once made her float. Over the past few months, she has begun to seek out distractions outside the home, times when she can just be Amanda, without the burden of marriage and expectations. John's work, a growing technology company, demanded more and more of his attention. Meetings went on until late, and he often arrived home exhausted, without much energy to talk. He knew things between them had changed, but he always thought there would be time to resolve it. On vacation, he told himself, when we have time for just the two of us, everything will go back to normal. Meanwhile, Amanda began spending more time with her friends, especially those who didn't have children or who led more uncomplicated lives. Outings became more frequent, always justified as a way to relax and disconnect. It was in these moments, surrounded by conversations that didn't involve responsibilities, that she felt a freedom she hadn't experienced in a long time. John, even though he noticed the growing distance, preferred to believe that it was something temporary. He tried to make up for her absence with small gestures of affection, making her breakfast before leaving for work, sending her messages in the middle of the day asking how she was doing. Amanda, however, received these kindnesses with a tense smile, responding mechanically, without the same tenderness as before. They seemed to live in two parallel worlds, orbiting the same house, but without really connecting. When they were together, their conversations were superficial. John would ask about her day, and Amanda would answer briefly, diverting to more general topics. The nights they spent together were calm but empty, filled with a kind of comfortable silence, a silence that, months ago, would have been unbearable. In John's mind, all of this was temporary. He believed that the time, dedication and love they had for each other would be enough to overcome any crisis. He had seen marriages go through difficult times, and he always imagined that theirs was strong enough to withstand it. It was a matter of time before everything went back to normal. Amanda, however, saw marriage as something that had already changed irrevocably. And although I still loved John, I didn't know if that love was enough to continue the way they were. Emotional fatigue began to weigh more heavily on Amanda. She began to long for the moments when she was away from home, where she could be another version of herself, without John's inquisitive gazes or his unspoken expectations that she should be the perfect wife. And it was in these moments that she began to question herself about what she really wanted in her life. One night, after one of these outings with her friends, Amanda came home and found John sitting on the couch, reading a work report. He looked at her, smiled tiredly and asked how the night had been. "Good, the girls look great," she replied, with a casual tone. He turned his attention back to the document in his hands as she walked up the stairs towards her bedroom, already thinking about the next time she could disconnect from it all. Deep down, John knew something was breaking. He could feel it, but he didn't want to admit it. He clung to the idea that the love they had built over the years would be enough to overcome any obstacle. Yet Amanda's every mechanical gesture, every soulless smile, every night spent away, all of it left an invisible scar on him. But he continued to believe that things could get better, that the love he felt was strong enough for both of them. However, the cracks continued to deepen, and the distance between them grew larger every day. Amanda, on the other hand, began to feel increasingly disconnected from the life she had once imagined would be forever. And so, the silent tension between them grew, building to a point where it would be impossible to ignore. The atmosphere in the house seemed more tense with each passing day. Mornings became silent and dinners, when they occurred, were filled with shallow conversations and averted glances. Amanda continued her routine of going out with her friends, and John, increasingly absorbed in work, tried to find solace in the little things that still kept them connected. Deep down, he knew he was holding on to fragments of what the relationship once was, but he couldn't let go of the hope that it could still be fixed. One night, while preparing for another one of these outings, Amanda looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman he saw was not the same one who once fell in love with John. There was a distance in her eyes, a coldness that she couldn't hide, even from herself. She knew that the situation couldn't continue for long, but she didn't have the courage to face the truth. Deep down, a part of her still wanted to believe that what she was doing was an attempt to find herself again. But something inside her screamed that she was wrong, that her decisions were about to bring everything to the breaking point. John, on the other side, watched Amanda get ready, as he did every night before going out. He didn't say anything. Some time ago, he decided that confronting her about her absences would only create another barrier between them. But that night felt different. Amanda was more distant, the smile she forced when saying goodbye had a weight that he couldn't ignore. She mumbled that she would be back late and left, leaving an uncomfortable silence in the air. Home alone, John decided he needed to clear his mind. He took the car keys and went out to drive around the city, aimlessly. The night was cold, the wind was blowing through the windows, and the sound of the engine was the only noise that accompanied it. The streets were almost deserted, and he let his thoughts wander back to the last few months, trying to find an exact moment when everything started to fall apart. I couldn't remember. The change between them was so gradual, so silent, that it seemed designed not to be noticed until it was too late. As he drove, an uneasy feeling began to grow inside him. A part of him was pushing him to stop avoiding the truth. Something was happening, he knew it. It was more than going out with friends, more than vague excuses. He didn't want to be the kind of man who distrusted his own wife, but the pieces didn't fit. The distrust gnawed at him, even though he tried to stifle that feeling. John then decided to do something he never imagined, follow her. He didn't know what he expected to find, but he needed to know. He headed towards the bar where Amanda and her friends used to meet, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't notice. The bar was packed, and he parked across the street, where he could watch without being noticed. Loud music echoed from the place, and the laughter of people in lively groups contrasted with the agitation growing inside. Amanda was there, laughing, as usual. But that night, something was different. She wasn't just with her friends. A man, who John had never seen before, approached Amanda in a way that could not be ignored. He was tall, confident, with an easy smile and a relaxed posture. Amanda's friends seemed comfortable with his presence, laughing and talking as if it were natural. John felt a chill run down his spine. He watched from a distance, increasingly restless. The man placed his hand on Amanda's shoulder, a casual intimacy that didn't seem like the first time it had happened. Amanda didn't move away, on the contrary, she smiled back, as if that approach was desired. John's heart raced, cold sweat running down his forehead even in the night air. He couldn't look away, every gesture seemed to confirm what he had feared for months. Her laugh, the way she tilted her head to hear what the man was saying, everything indicated that he was right. She wasn't just there with friends. John's stomach dropped. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. He didn't know how to react, what to do next. Part of him wanted to get out of the car, go to her and demand explanations. But another part was paralyzed, as if his body was stuck in that moment, unable to act. He saw Amanda get up from the table and walk towards the exit of the bar, accompanied by the man. John felt his legs shake as he realized where they were going. Amanda looked around, as if she wanted to make sure no one she knew saw her. She and the man walked to a car parked a few meters away. They entered together, and the door closed, isolating them from the outside world. John's blood boiled, and he felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces. There, inside that car, silence screamed louder than any words. The confirmation he feared was there, clear as day. Amanda was betraying their trust, the love they had built together, the promises they had made. The betrayal he had tried to deny to himself for so long was now laid bare before him, raw and unbearable. John didn't know how to deal with what he had just witnessed. He was not the type of man to explode in anger, to confront with aggression, but despair took over his thoughts. The pain of betrayal was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was an emptiness that gnawed away at him, a deep wound that he knew wouldn't heal easily. He remained in the car, motionless, observing the silence of the street and the movement inside the other vehicle. The image of Amanda smiling at another man, the ease with which she betrayed him, all of it burned in his mind like a flame that couldn't be put out. There were no more doubts, no more excuses. Now all that was left was the certainty that his marriage was destroyed. The clock on the car's dashboard seemed frozen, just like John. He couldn't move, he couldn't get out of there. The cold night contrasted with the heat of his suppressed anger, and as time passed, he knew he was about to make a decision that would change everything. John was silent, watching the car where Amanda was with another man. The world around him seemed to disintegrate in slow motion, and he felt like he was trapped in a bubble of distorted reality. His mind, a whirlwind of emotions, oscillated between anger, disbelief and unbearable pain. It was difficult to breathe. Every heartbeat felt like an explosion inside his chest. He didn't move. He stood there, still, watching, while his mind tried to process what his eyes had already confirmed: Amanda had betrayed him. Not just that night, but possibly much longer ago than he realized. Why hadn't he noticed before? How were you so blind that you couldn't see what was right in front of your eyes? The clock on the car dashboard said midnight. He didn't know how long it had been since she got into that car, but it felt like an eternity. The pain of seeing her with another man was overwhelming. Part of him wanted to open the car door and demand explanations, scream, question. But another part, the one most hurt and torn, just wanted to escape. He knew the truth wouldn't change what he already knew, but somehow facing it felt necessary. After a while, he saw the other car's lights come on. Amanda and the man left, and he saw her say goodbye quickly, without any ceremony. She got into his car as naturally as she had entered his life so many years ago, and headed home. John followed her from a distance, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't notice. When he got home, John waited a few minutes before going inside. He needed time to compose himself, to control the turmoil happening inside him. Amanda was already in the room when he walked through the door, the soft sound of the shower indicating that she was taking a shower, perhaps trying to wash away the guilt that he imagined was overwhelming her. He sat on the bed, face in his hands, trying to think of what to do. But the truth was, he didn't know how to react. There was no right way to deal with that betrayal, there was no manual for the kind of pain he was feeling. A few minutes later, Amanda came out of the bathroom, wearing a silk robe. When she saw him sitting on the bed, her gaze froze for a moment, but she soon covered it with a tight smile. "Hey love. Are you well? You arrived early today," she commented casually, as if nothing had happened. John stared at her in silence for a few seconds. Every word he wanted to say was caught in his throat, as if emotions were suffocating his voice. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he needed to talk. Amanda looked at him with slight uneasiness, probably feeling the weight of tension that hung in the air. "Amanda, can we talk?" The words finally came out, filled with contained pain. She blinked a few times, surprised by the serious tone in his voice. "Sure, about what?" John took a deep breath, trying to stay calm even though his insides were in shambles. "I know what's going on. I know you betrayed me." Amanda's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, her face turned pale. But soon, as if trying to regain control of the situation, she sighed and sat down next to him on the bed. "John, I can explain." "Explain what?" He interrupted, his voice now firmer. "You betrayed me, Amanda. I saw you. I followed you tonight. I saw you with that man." The silence that followed was crushing. Amanda looked at her hands, her eyes teary, but the words didn't seem to come. It was as if she knew that anything she said at that moment wouldn't change what he already knew. She had been caught, and now, there was no turning back. I didn't want it to be like this, John," she finally said, her voice shaking. I felt so lost, so suffocated these past few months. I thought that maybe, if I found something outside of here, it would help me find what I lost inside. And you thought cheating on the man who loves you would be the solution?" John's voice was bitter, filled with pain and anger. Amanda looked him in the eye for the first time since the conversation had started. Tears ran silently down his face, but he felt no compassion. The pain he felt was too deep to be soothed by tears. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But I was lost. I don't know how to explain it, John. I still love you, I swear. I never wanted to lose you." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Love? That's not love, Amanda. Love does not destroy, it does not deceive. Love builds, sacrifices, fights. What you did was betray everything we built. She had no answer. Her silence only confirmed what he already knew. Amanda had crossed a line that could not be undone. Finally, she took a deep breath and, in a low voice, said, maybe we can try something different, John. I know I made a mistake, but I still want to be with you. Maybe we can open up our marriage, make things more free. Without so many strings attached. John stared at her in disbelief. The pain slowly turned into a mixture of anger and contempt. An open marriage, Amanda? Is this what you want? You betrayed me and now you think the solution to this is to simply open what we built. Do you really think this is the solution? She didn't respond right away. Her words, so cold and calculated, left him floored. Everything he had struggled to build over the years was being treated as casually as someone would suggest a change of decor. The emptiness inside John grew, and he realized that what was happening here wasn't just a physical betrayal. It was something deeper. It was the deconstruction of everything he believed in, the end of a life he thought was unshakable. Amanda finally tried to get closer to him, but John pulled away, unable to bear her closeness. John, I really think this could work. We can still be together, just in a different way. I don't want to lose you. Lose? Amanda, you've already lost me. He stood up from the bed, looking down at her, feeling a crushing weight in every word he said. Do you think this kind of absurd solution will fix what you did? That seeing me with someone else every now and then will erase the pain I'm feeling right now? Amanda lowered her head, the tears flowing faster now. But to John, those tears meant nothing anymore. He knew what was between them was beyond repair. What Amanda had suggested was the definitive end to any hope he might have had. But even so, there was something more. Something Amanda wasn't saying, and John, somehow, knew that her proposal wasn't just a result of desperation. There was something deeper, something she was still hiding. The feeling that there was still an unrevealed secret tormented him. He left the room, leaving Amanda in tears. Every step he took seemed to increase the weight he felt in his chest, but at the same time, something inside him screamed that this wasn't the last truth he would hear that night. John slammed the bedroom door shut, his hands shaking with anger. He walked down the stairs, feeling the weight of each step, as if the ground was about to crumble beneath his feet. My head was spinning with Amanda's words, the absurd proposal to open the marriage, as if that could erase what she had done. The silence in the house seemed more oppressive than ever, and the air was thick, difficult to breathe. He entered the room and threw himself on the couch, his hands covering his face. He was exhausted, emotionally exhausted, but he knew that the conversation with Amanda was not over. What bothered him, besides the betrayal, was the feeling that there was still something to be revealed. It was as if the betrayal, however devastating, was just the tip of the iceberg. Something deeper, darker, still hovered between them. A few minutes later, he heard light footsteps coming down the stairs. Amanda appeared at the entrance to the room, her eyes still swollen from tears. She watched him from a distance, hesitant, as if she didn't know whether to get closer or give him more space. But John knew he needed to finish this, needed to hear the complete truth, even if it destroyed him completely. John, Amanda began, her voice wavering. Please listen to me. I know asking to open the marriage was ridiculous. I was desperate, I didn't know what to say, how to try to save what we have. But that doesn't erase what I did. I betrayed you. I know you probably won't forgive me for this, but there's more you need to know. John looked up at her, eyes fixed on hers, waiting for her to continue. He knew what was coming wouldn't be easy to hear, but something inside him pushed him to discover what was being hidden. Amanda took a few hesitant steps towards him, sat down in the armchair opposite him and took a deep breath, as if she was preparing to confess something that had been tormenting her for a long time. It wasn't just this one time, John, Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper. I cheated on you several times. John felt the impact of those words like a punch to the stomach. It was as if the ground had disappeared from beneath his feet. He knew there was something more, but he didn't expect it to be so devastating. The shock left him temporarily unresponsive, and all he could do was continue to stare at her, waiting for her to explain. I didn't plan this, I swear, Amanda continued, tears flowing again. It happened little by little. At first, it was just harmless flirting. Little moments where I felt alive again, different. I don't know when it crossed the line. But when I realized, I was already involved. John shook his head, as if trying to push her words out of his mind, but they echoed in his head. He stood up abruptly, walking in circles around the room, hands in his hair, trying to process what he had just heard. The emptiness in his stomach grew, turning into a physical pain, a feeling of betrayal so deep he could barely breathe. How many times, Amanda? With how many? His voice finally came out, shaky and filled with suppressed fury. She lowered her head, her shoulders shaking slightly. I don't know. More than once, with 2 people. I didn't want it to be like this, John. I was confused, feeling suffocated. None of this is an excuse, I know, but I didn't know how to deal with what was happening inside me. John's anger bubbled, and he felt like screaming, breaking something, anything, to vent the pain that was exploding in his chest. And you thought opening the marriage would be the solution to this? He shook his head in disbelief. Do you really think more betrayal would be the way to fix what you destroyed? Amanda began to cry more intensely, her words coming out between sobs. I didn't know what to do, John. I got lost. I thought maybe if you had more freedom, I could somehow make up for what I did. I was trying to find a way not to lose you. John stopped, staring at her with a mixture of pain and anger. But you've already lost me, Amanda. You lost me when you decided to betray the trust one gave you. It's not about freedom, it's about respect. Something you clearly no longer have for me or us. She stood up, desperate, and walked towards him, holding his hands, trying to find some redemption amidst the chaos she created. Please, John, I know I was wrong. But I still love you, I still want to save what we have. I would do anything to fix this. He pulled away, pulling his hands away from hers. Save. Amanda, you destroyed everything. And you knew exactly what you were doing. You knew what was at stake every time you went out with them. And now you expect me to just accept it. Pretend this never happened. She sobbed, putting her hands over her face, unable to look at him. John felt the pain throbbing in his head, but there was something more. There was still a part of the story she hadn't told. He knew that. And this feeling that something bigger was about to be revealed tormented him. Who are they, Amanda? Who are the men you cheated on me with? She hesitated, looking at him with a panicked expression. Does it matter? John crossed his arms, clenching his fists. Of course it matters. I deserve to know who you broke our promises to. Amanda took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. One of them you don't know. A coworker, someone I got involved with while traveling. It was a mistake. And, the other one, John remained silent, waiting for the final blow, which he knew was coming. The other is someone you know. Someone close to us. His voice was low, almost inaudible. John felt a chill run down his spine. His heart raced. Who, Amanda? Who? She hesitated again, her hands shaking as she gripped the arm of the couch. Then, finally, she looked at him, her eyes red from crying. It's Mike. Your best friend. The impact of her words was immediate and devastating. Mike. The friend he had grown up with whom he shared secrets, joys and sadness. Mike, the person he trusted most, who was always by his side, in good times and bad. It was with him that Amanda had betrayed him. The ground seemed to disappear completely beneath John's feet. Amanda's betrayal had already been brutal, but now it had taken on unimaginable proportions. It wasn't just his wife. He was your friend. The person he trusted blindly. He felt anger consume him, but it was an anger that found no outlet. It was a crushing pain, one that took away any shred of control he still had. Amanda took a step back, as if afraid of John's reaction, but he remained still, his eyes fixed on her, the expression of disbelief written on his face. He didn't know what to say, what to think. Amanda's betrayal was devastating in itself, but the fact that Mike was involved made it even worse. What were you guys thinking? John's voice finally came out, hoarse and filled with bitterness. How could you do this to me? Amanda shook her head, tears still flowing. I don't know, John. I don't know. It was a mistake, a series of mistakes, and I got lost in the middle of it all. Mike, he was only there when I was vulnerable. I didn't want it to be like that. But her words were useless now. There was nothing that could justify what she did, and the fact that Mike, her closest friend, was involved made it all the more unforgivable. John took a step back, feeling like the world around him was falling apart. Every piece of his life felt like it was being ripped from his hands. He needed to get out of there, he needed to get away from Amanda, from everything. Without saying anything else, he turned and walked to the door. John left the house without looking back, feeling the cold night wind hit his face as he walked aimlessly through the dark streets. His head throbbed with the pain of the revelation he had just heard. It wasn't just Amanda's betrayal that consumed him, but the betrayal of Mike, his lifelong friend. It was a double blow, a wound so deep he couldn't imagine how it could ever heal. Anger and despair mixed in his chest, creating a whirlwind of emotions that left him on the verge of collapse. The streets were empty, and the silence of the night seemed to amplify the chaos within him. John felt that everything around him had lost its meaning. Every step he took felt heavier, as if the world was falling apart with each movement. He stopped in front of a park, the same one where, years ago, he and Mike used to meet to talk. How many times had they sat there, side by side, sharing secrets and plans for the future? And now, all those memories were tainted by betrayal. John sat on one of the wooden benches, the cold of the metal piercing his skin. His mind was racing, trying to find answers to questions he didn't even know how to ask. How could Mike, someone so close, do this to him? How did Amanda have the courage to cross that line, knowing it would destroy everything? The questions echoed, without answer, without logic. John knew he would never understand the real reason behind their actions, and it consumed him even more. He picked up his cell phone, his fingers shaking as he typed Mike's name into his contact list. The dilemma forming in his mind was almost unbearable. Confront Mike now? Wait until the anger subsides? Or just cut all ties and pretend you never heard anything again? Neither of these options seemed satisfactory. The dilemma was too big, too complex to be resolved with a single action. But he couldn't leave things as they were. I needed answers. He needed to face the man he considered a brother and understand what had led him to cross that line. Before he could rationalize too much, he pressed the dial button. The phone rang a few times before Mike answered, the calm, carefree voice on the other end irritating him instantly. John. What happened, man? It is good too. Mike's voice was familiar, but now it sounded like an insult. John held the cell phone tightly, his breathing ragged. For a few seconds, he didn't respond, struggling to maintain control. I know, Mike. I know about you and Amanda. The silence on the other side was immediate. No words, no sounds. John could almost hear the panic building in Mike's mind, and it only fueled his anger even more. John, man, I can explain, Mike's voice came out finally, hesitant and full of guilt. Explain. Do you think there is something that can be explained? How do you justify destroying the trust of someone you called a friend? How do you explain such a betrayal? John snapped, unable to contain the fury in his voice. It wasn't planned. I swear, John. I never wanted things to get to this point. I don't know what happened. I was there for Amanda, and one day things just changed. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. John laughed, a bitter, contemptuous sound. A mistake? You two cheated on me repeatedly, and now you're saying it was a mistake. Mike, you destroyed everything. Everything I believed in, everything I thought was solid. Mike sighed on the other end of the line, and John could feel the guilt and desperation in his breath. I don't know what to say, man. I know nothing I say will fix what I did. I betrayed you in a way that there is no return. I just want you to know that, despite everything, I never wanted to hurt you. I lost myself, just like Amanda. We both made a bad mistake, and now we're here. John was silent for a few seconds, trying to process those words. The pain still burned, but now there was something more. An emptiness. A feeling that no matter how much Mike regretted it, nothing he said or did could erase the damage. Their friendship was dead, as was his marriage to Amanda. I don't know what you expect me to do with this information, Mike. I lost my wife and my best friend at the same time. And why? For a moment of weakness? For a series of mistakes that you two decided to make? John was exhausted. His voice, which had previously been one of pure anger, now had a tone of resignation. I know I can't ask you for forgiveness. I know nothing will change what happened, but... John, I'm here. If you want to hate me for the rest of your life, I'll accept it. I just wanted you to know that. I regret all of this too. John hung up the phone without saying another word. There was nothing more to be said. He knew that what Mike was feeling wouldn't change the fact that the betrayal had already happened. The damage was done. And now, he felt alone, desolate, surrounded by memories of a life that no longer existed. As the silence of the night enveloped him, John realized he was trapped in an impossible moral dilemma. Confront Amanda again? Cut ties with Mike completely? Or simply disappear, leaving everything behind and starting over from scratch? Each option seemed equally unbearable. He knew that from that moment on, any choice he made would change his life forever. And the weight of that decision felt overwhelming. John stood up from the bench, taking a deep breath of the cold night air. I knew I needed to go home, face Amanda once again. But deep down, the feeling that his life had changed forever was inevitable. The betrayal had destroyed everything he knew, and now, all that was left was a broken man, trying to find a way through the rubble of his life. John walked home with heavy steps, feeling the weariness of a lifetime weighing on his shoulders. The silence in the house was dense, almost suffocating. Amanda was in the living room, sitting on the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes red and swollen. She hadn't left since he left the house. She looked smaller, shrunken, a shadow of the woman he once loved. He stopped at the door, watching her for a moment. The heart, once boiling with anger and hurt, was now numb. John didn't know what else to feel, other than a huge emptiness that consumed everything around him. Amanda slowly raised her eyes, meeting his, but said nothing. The silence between them was deafening, deeper than any fight or argument they could have had. He came in and sat in the armchair facing her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. It was as if they had already said everything that needed to be said, but at the same time, they both knew that this would be the last conversation. The tension between them was palpable, but different from before. Now, it was the end. I called Mike. John finally broke the silence, his voice low and emotionless. Amanda didn't react. She just nodded, as if she had already expected it. I don't know what to make of what he said. Just like I don't know what to do with what you did. But, Amanda, there is no more us. His words were firm, but they no longer carried the weight of anger, only acceptance. The tears began to flow down Amanda's face again, silently, as if she knew there was no way to fight anymore. She wanted to ask for forgiveness once again, but she knew it would be useless. John was beyond forgiveness. She felt it in the tone of his voice, in the blank look he cast in her direction. "I'm leaving, Amanda." He stood up, feeling the weight of those words in his own chest. "I'm going to leave you with this, with the choices you've made. There's nothing more I can do here. Our marriage is over." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands, the sound of muffled crying filling the space around her. But John didn't waver. He knew that this was the only way out for both of them. The love that once existed had been destroyed, not only by betrayal, but by the lack of trust, by lies, by broken promises. "John, please, forgive me," she managed to say, between sobs, her voice broken with pain. "I know I did everything wrong, but I still love you. I still want to fix this." He looked at her for a moment, expressionless. There was something devastating about that request, but at the same time, he knew that none of it mattered anymore. The love she said she felt no longer made sense to him. "Some things can't be fixed, Amanda. Some things, once broken, can't be turned back." He turned, walking to the door. Amanda stood there, alone, watching as he left the home they built together, knowing he would never return. The sound of the door closing echoed through the empty house, and Amanda felt her world completely fall apart. John was leaving, and with him, everything she once believed she had. John, now outside, took a deep breath, the cold night air filling his lungs. He walked to his car, knowing it would be the last time he would see the house where so many memories had been made. The life he knew was officially over. He knew it would still take a long time to heal the wounds, but at least now, he was free to start over. Weeks passed. John moved away from everything and everyone, taking time for himself, away from Amanda, away from Mike, away from the life he knew. Mike tried to reach out a few times, but John ignored him. There was no more room for that kind of friendship in his life. Mike's betrayal was as unforgivable as Amanda's, and he knew he could never trust him again. Amanda, on the other hand, faced the consequences of her actions. She lost not only her husband, but also her circle of friends, who soon discovered what had happened. Mike, after being confronted by John, ended the affair with her. Shame and regret consumed Amanda daily, but now, all she had was the loneliness she had created. John, now far from the life he once knew, began to reconstruct his own story. He decided to travel, find new paths and leave the past behind. He knew that the pain of betrayal would follow him for some time, but he also knew that, one day, life would make sense again. The scar would remain, but he would be able to move on, stronger and wiser. The ending was not happy for Amanda. Guilt and regret consumed her, and she began to live a life of regret. Mike, in turn, also found himself isolated, without John's friendship and with a tarnished reputation among mutual friends. Both suffered the consequences of the choices they made, and the price was too high to pay. John, however, found peace in his fresh start. He learned that despite betrayal and pain, life goes on. And over time, he discovered that starting over is often the best way to leave the past behind and move forward. Comment below what you thought of this story. And, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, take the opportunity to subscribe now. Remember, the channel does not support any type of cheating. See you in the next story.